Uh, Please allow me to welcome you, those of you who are watching live and those who will watch it later, to the first online conference of the Center for Global Polytheist and Indigenous Traditions, hosted by Indic Academy. When the CGPIT was inaugurated in March of this year as Indic Academy's newest thought center, a conference was projected for later this year, rather less time than it usually takes to organize such an event. And yet, thanks to the vision of Hari Kiran Vadlamani and the hard work of everyone at Indic Academy, here we are. I wish particularly to thank Hari for his understanding of my vision for the center and for sharing in it so enthusiastically, and to those who have been working long hours at inconvenient times to make this conference and accompanying exhibition possible. The mission of the Center for Global Polytheist and Indigenous Traditions is to promote a renaissance in those traditions which honor the divinity in all beings and the inexhaustible multiplicity of the divine. We seek to help practitioners of these traditions to tend their legacies and foster creativity within them, as well as to interpret them for outsiders in the spirit of building bridges between civilizations. We do not shrink from critiquing the distortions these traditions have suffered from generations of scholars and the injustices they have suffered from religious conversion, colonialism, and white supremacy. We seek to promote interdisciplinary and innovative research methods and paradigms, including affirming the inherent value of direct experience of the gods, spirits, and divine forces, both in antiquity and today. We're committed to the widest possible dissemination of the results of research and the broadest possible participation in our projects, both from within conventional academic structures and beyond them. We do not find the distinction between the cutting edge of new thought and the recollection of ancient wisdom, or between science and religion, to be salient, insofar as they share the goal of the flourishing of human and other life through the discovery of truth. The center's work is rooted in primordial revelations, but also committed to the proposition that theophany is ongoing and a human right, that the boundaries between traditions are real, but also always permeable, and that if we only remove the obstacles to hearing them, the voices of the living immortals are here to guide us and cooperate with us in building a world of mutual respect, dialogue, and reciprocal aid. To my fellow polytheists, allow me to welcome you to a space in which those who would have us justify our gods will instead have to listen to us. The long process of reclaiming pride in having many gods reaches a new stage with this gathering. Here in this virtual space, the presence of the gods, devas, theoi, dei, dewoi, diwata, shin, nejeru, orishas, dema, shapiri, teteo, and divinities of every other nature and kind is welcomed and celebrated. Here we speak their names. We do not hide them beneath a universal spirit or Godhead which would grant them being. Where something of this sort exists in a tradition, we welcome its explication, but we will not participate in expropriating it to justify the erasure of the many. We believe that only the bold and unequivocal affirmation of this radical multiplicity can secure the future of these traditions, and that only the gods themselves can secure the future of this world. We also affirm that the revival of sundered traditions is crucial to the survival and flourishing of continuous ones. The revival of sundered traditions sends the unmistakable message that conversion is not the end of the story, that the suppression of our gods will never be achieved, for their return is only a prayer or a dream away. Their inspiration can catch fire in our souls at any time, lit by a name or an image, reconstituted from the dust of ruins, always outliving their would-be conquerors. The revival of polytheist traditions, thought to have been extinguished, demonstrates that continuous polytheist traditions are not merely preserving a historical legacy, but participating in a contemporary revolution of thought and experience, that they belong not to the past, but to the future. The prison of historicism in which continuous traditions are confined exacts from them as the price of their legitimacy that they do no more than prop up whatever remains standing as monuments to a past sealed off even from their very devotees. We no longer recognize the tribunals that seek to pass judgment on the legitimacy of our traditions and refuse to recognize any of them as dead. All things are full of gods, and the gods are even here, as the fathers of the so-called Western tradition affirmed in their day. The gods will not be trapped in immanence, reduced to psychological complexes, or objects of bloodless, merely aesthetic appreciation. They are not gears in a cosmic machine, but speak to us from their transcendent freedom, which they offer to us if we will simply take it and join them in the ecstasy of existence. Only an enchanted world is free. Thank you. If you would like, we can now move directly to the session with the dialogue on pluralism. And in connection with that, I have a brief statement that I think follows on fairly nicely from my opening address. And so I can present that, and then we'll perhaps call on the official participants in the dialogue in order to speak on to give their opening statements. All right. I had a quote at the beginning of my statement to help to situate the notion of the dialogue on pluralism. This is from Mario Blazer's article, "Is Another Cosmopolitics Possible?" He writes, "Cosmopolitics offers a way to avoid the pitfalls of a politics that, defining in advance that the differences at stake in a disagreement are between perspectives on a single reality, makes it possible to sideline some concerns by deeming them unrealistic and therefore unreasonable or irrelevant. Figuring the common world as its possible result rather than as a starting point, cosmopolitics disrupts the quick recourse to ruling out concerns on the basis of their ostensible lack of reality," unquote. Part of the motivation for this conference is to help draw attention to the wider intellectual, social, and political significance of polytheism as a way of being, a significance transcending the sphere of religion narrowly defined. In essence, this concerns polytheism as the spiritual infrastructure for radical cosmopolitical pluralism. The unlearned, unforced capacity of civilizations all over the world from time immemorial to acknowledge and recognize a manifold of divinities within their own tradition, with their different laws and paths, as well as the manifold beyond, that the others have their gods as well, is an indispensable skill that we must learn again and put into practice if we are to save our world. For this reason, polytheism demands the attention even of those who do not think of themselves as concerned with religion as such. We need to pull down the walls that separate off from science the ancient wisdom of cosmogony. I wish to propose that the plurality of cosmogonies do not approximate a single cosmic order which lies beyond them. This idea, rather, is the forgetting of what a cosmos is, I would wish to claim. A cosmos, in the truest sense, can only be made of cosmoi, all the way down, and it's only as a potential cosmic center, giving both law and mystery to the totality, that living beings achieve their innate dignity. In historical and contemporary polytheistic civilizations, we see hundreds and even thousands of gods having been worshipped. Polytheism is often treated as though it consists of pantheons organized in a univocal fashion, with deities having closely determined interlocking functions. In reality, actually existing polytheisms look very different from each of the diverse perspectives constituted by the many deities they encompass. Rather than univocal, they are plurivocal. The very nature of the universe, its origin and destiny, and the preeminent powers within it differ in the eyes of different devotees. And yet, these diverse perspectives coalesce into a single complex tradition and a way of life, which has generally been highly stable for millennia on end. And this is only to speak to the internal pluralism of each such tradition. The challenge I'm issuing is to see this radical plurality not as a bug, but as a feature, not as something to be explained away, but as what can explain to us how we may live in the world together and flourish, humans and non-humans alike. The tendency has been to explain polytheisms with reference to some underlying or overarching unity, whether internal to the tradition, such as a supreme deity or a conception of pure divine force or energy, or external to it, such as the unity of a state, of a bioregion, or of a language. But these are demonstrably inadequate. The position of supreme deity, who fills it, and the way it is conceived, the nature of any pervasive divine force and its relationship to the gods themselves can easily be shown for any given tradition to differ according to the perspectives of worshippers of different gods. On the other hand, to see the integrity of the theological tradition as dependent upon some external factor, whether political, geographical, or cultural, will obviously fail to account for many counterexamples in which we nevertheless recognize the same phenomenon of a highly diverse field of divine agencies in stable coexistence. And yet it's not that these agencies are atomized and alienated from one another either. Rather, their entanglement and their ability to appropriate one another reciprocally is defining for polytheisms. Moreover, polytheisms are not only significant on account of their internal pluralism, but also for their pluralistic perspective on the other traditions with which they come into contact, as compared with the monotheist traditions, which have suffered bitter internal schisms and also seek to eliminate any other traditions that they encounter. Again, the tendency has been to explain this trait of polytheisms by some kind of unity, either a disposition to see all gods as ultimately one god, or the propensity for a polytheist tradition to translate foreign gods into their own. But the former, by reducing polytheism to monotheism, fails to explain the very different historical conduct of the monotheist traditions, while the latter greatly overstates the significance of a single interpretative tactic only occasionally attested. All of these inadequate explanations for the stable internal and external pluralism in polytheistic civilizations share one thing in common, namely the assumption that otherness is only tolerated upon reducing it to sameness. This presupposition, however, inasmuch as it holds plurality to be inherently undesirable, clearly shows a mindset inimical to the phenomenon for which it would account. Hence, if we are to grasp what it is that makes possible the internal and external pluralism of polytheistic civilizations, we must instead begin from the radical affirmation that the unique, the peculiar, can be desired directly for its own sake and not through any intermediary, enabling the bonds formed with it to preserve their integrity on any scale, from the domestic to the cosmic. A final dimension of the pluriverse or multiverse that polytheism generates and sustains is that it necessarily includes non-human entities, whether gods or spirits, other animals, plants, or natural substances and forces, as agents and not merely as posited in a sovereign human consciousness or existing for human use. These non-human agencies have a perspective as well, and each of them forms a cosmos for itself. If there is any privilege to the human perspective on such a world, it lies not in our sovereign mastery, but solely in our capacity to operate between multiple perspectives and negotiate among them, just as the polytheist does among multiple gods, recognizing the sovereignty proper to each. All right, and with that, now there's a certain order to let's see. There's a certain order to the participants, which was somewhat at random, but if you like, in principle, Harsh was first on the list. There's no particular reason for that. Let me ask first, do any of the official participants, Harsh, Dr. Saxena, Dr. Mitra, or Adam, or Indic Explorer, do any of you have time requirements that means that you need to go first? Let me just, and you can speak up if so, or you can say so in the chat. Otherwise, I will assume that we'll just go according to the order that that was given in the program, which, as I say, was rather a random product. Let me also note that I will be ending the session about 15 minutes early relative to what was in the program, just to give people a chance to set up properly for the next panel, so that we have a little bit of a gap.